So our final presentation of the day, or sorry, of the session is Stephen Keith. He's CEO of Labrador Uranium. So Stephen, why don't you?
Thank you, David, and thank you to the Red Cloud team. I'm just going to put up my slides. Hopefully the full screen works. Can you see that there?
Yeah, I can see it. It's not in full screen, but there we go. Perfect.
Okay. So now the key is when I start talking, if it doesn't move, tell me, because sometimes that doesn't work on the system. So again, thank you, everyone. I am going to put on a timer to make sure I don't blow through the time. So relative to these other stories, we have a very different story to tell. Labrador Uranium is a very new company. We went public in March of this year, and we're in a different part of Canada. So we are in Labrador. We have control of almost an entire district. We have almost 140,000 hectares of land along 125 kilometers in an area that saw tens of millions of dollars spent in the last uranium boom, and which saw multiple discoveries, including what is now Paladin's 120 million pound Michelin deposit. So we've gone back in there and with our partners, we've consolidated this entire basin. And now we're going at it again, using a more modern data focused approach, and now owning the entire belt, being able to look up and look for larger projects. Did you see the slides that moved there, David?
Yep, all good.
Okay, hallelujah. That doesn't always work. So I'll start with the motherhood statements. It is a company full of established company builders. On our board, we see people like Phil Williams, who's the executive chairman of Consolidated Uranium, Richard Patricio, who's the CEO of Mega Uranium, and I noticed on two of your boards here on this panel, and Justin Reed, who's also the CEO of Troilus Gold. The three of them and myself have built companies and developed them before. I've sold companies before. But on top of which, look, we're an exploration company and we're building an exceptional geological team, and I'll walk you through them in a second. We do believe this is going to be Canada's next great uranium region. But look, let's be clear, this is not the Athabasca Basin. We are not going to find multi-percent grades. For example, the Paladin's Michelin deposit is looking like it's around 800 to 850 ppm. So that's 0.08%. So when you look at the Athabasca Basin, that might make you scared. That being said, that all the mines being developed or in operation in Namibia are in that 100 to 400 ppm range. Projects like what we just saw with Laramide and others, you're looking at 750 to 890 ppm. These are mineable resources and grades depending on the deposit, right? So at these grades, you want them near surface. Happily, that's what we have. And you want them to be fairly large, which what the Michelin deposit shows us and what the geology shows us in the area, we do have that potential. And additionally, Labrador is a terrific place to work. It is considered by the Fraser Institute the 8th best place in the world to invest in mining. The main local First Nation is the Inuit, and they have their own self-government and have a process and a system for looking at and permitting projects like this. And then finally, the opportunity. I think everybody in this panel and on this in this conference has talked a lot about uranium, so I won't. But in the end, I'm a supply and demand person, and I think the long-term demand side of this is going to drive us for a very long time. So that's what we go. So the company snapshot, again, we're just under 60 million shares outstanding. We are well financed. In the last sort of 8 months, we've raised approximately $10 million, 10 million hard, 10 million flow through. So we are in very good shape to do what we need to do over the next 2 years to make hopefully a significant discovery. We've got a great institutional shareholder base. So from the actual guys that put their money in, from mostly long only uranium funds to guys like Mega Uranium and Altius Minerals, who also remain quite supportive of what we're doing. I won't spend a ton of time on this slide. The board and myself, we can sing all we want, but I really want to talk about the geological side of this and our plan. So because of the amount of land and frankly, the amount of data that we have, this basin has been explored for 50 years. The majority of that was for copper, but not particularly, professional work on the copper side, in that it was prospecting and other work, but no one was looking for deposits. They were just trying to show that there was something there. In order to look at something like this, we need to have a different approach because it is too much land. Like in the first pass that the Altius guys did when they put this land package together, they generated 146 targets. That sounds great, But what do you do with 146 targets? How do you turn that into something? So we're looking at this from 2 points of view. One is fundamentally, as anything, you need geologists. You need people who can look at the deposits, drill them, do the proper work, and prove what is there. And we have that team, and that's led right now by Nancy Normore, who we actually pulled out of Voisey's Bay and has worked in the uranium sector for a very long time. So we have that skill set. That team is actually in Goose Bay now. The field camp is being built. And just for perspective, as I said earlier, we listed in March of this year. So we're a new company, but we are hitting the ground running. But the second piece of our strategy, the slide on it later, which I'll skip by because I'll talk to you about it now, is we're applying what we call a modern data-focused approach to this exploration program. And we're doing that by building our own machine learning, artificial intelligence plan and program. So Paul Pearson at the top of this list, Drew Heisman at the bottom of this list, this is what they have done. So Paul is a PhD geologist, he's a structural geologist. Drew has spent 15 years in the field, but in the last while, they have been focused on building out machine learning for applications in geology. And Paul especially, he won the Gawler Prize, looking at the Gawler Craton in Australia. And the challenge was, how do we look at this massive piece of land with all sorts of prospectivity and lots of data, but turn that into a real target? And he and his team were able to come up with a process to do that, and it worked. And he and Drew are doing that internally because, again, there's 50 years of data, and machine learning isn't what people think it is, or what a lot of people think it is, right? It's not just the data coming in. You have to figure out how to extract that data and feed it to the system, but you also need to teach the machine. And again, one of the great advantages here is this is an area that has been worked for a very long time. And there are known deposits, including Michelin, plus our own Moran Lake deposit, which does have a historical resource. So we can train the machine and looking at other deposits around the world that have similar signatures in knowing what to look for. It gives us it's a really nice piece to have with such a large land package. So we are, sorry about the noise in the background, it's a shared office. So the Central Mineral Belt, it is a great place to be. We're looking at 4 different geological provinces that have come together. And that means that we have all sorts of fluids and structures that have come to this area that have brought us what we have. And here's the guts of what we have. The CMB project, again, 139,000 hectares, over 140 targets. Every one of those black dots on that map there is a known uranium occurrence. Paladin's 120 million pound deposit, Michelin is highlighted there. The Moran Lake deposit, the C zone, that is that's our starting point. It's approximately 20 million pound uranium equivalent historical resource. It's about 10 million pounds uranium, 130 million pounds plus or minus of vanadium. It is at surface, which is a terrific thing for projects of these grades, because we will have grades significantly lower than this part than what you've just been seeing, but they're mineable. We also have what was Mega Uranium's Mustang Lake deposit, and that has known uranium downhole. They hit over 9 meters of uranium in the drilling of that. I'm going to skip over the geology just to get to the guts of this. So the machine learning, the regional targeting, but if one looks at this map, every one of those green dots is a known uranium occurrence. Every one of the red dots is a known copper occurrence. What's fascinating here is when Altius put the package together before we bought the assets from them, their main targets were all IOCG, and we think very similarly. You know, you see up in that Moran Lake area where the green and gold are coming in, green and red are coming in. We've found there's a historical deposit there. It does look like it grows northeast and southwest, both structurally and with the number of occurrences we find. But there's other structures sort of southeast of that structurally look really good and pop up all over the place with copper and gold and other minerals. We do believe this is an IOCG region. This is why we are applying this modern data-focused approach to exploration to find where those biggest targets are, right? But in the meantime, we can focus on what we know. So what's at Moran Lake? It is a known uranium historical deposit with vanadium. It is open at depth and northeast and southwest along strike. And all sorts of that package has not properly been investigated because it was never in a single hand. So that's what we're drilling this year. We'll be drilling at least 4,000 meters there this summer to see what we have and running significant geophysics with the goal of growing it, much like what Aurora did at Paladin. They started with 30 million pounds, and every time they drilled it, they grew it and turned this thing into a thing that at one point traded for $1.3 billion. So that's what we're hoping to do. Is that what's there? I can't tell you that, but we have the signatures, we have the findings. Now we've got to go drill it. Mustang Lake, it's a second deposit. I mentioned that earlier. That's the case study on Aurora. We do have another interesting project that's more exploratory and earlier stage in the north that I won't get into, but fundamentally, we're less than a year old. We've already spent $1 million on the ground. We expect to spend about $5 or $6 million this year before we get into our winter program. We've got over 146 targets, and using machine learning to refine that down. We are well capitalized. We have lots of cash to be able to do what we need to do. And now it's a matter of going and doing it. We're permitted and ready to work. So we control, that was my timer, so I didn't make David mad. We control an entire district. We really do with multi-commodities, and that is where the grade is going to come in. Although the uranium is mineable grade, having these other commodities come in will make it much more attractive, especially if we can show with the potential of the copper and gold in this area. There's a historical resource base. We do have this historical resource, and we believe it grows. So that's somewhere we start our existing value and grow from. Got great shareholders and investors in this thing, and a known exploration team. And now the job is straightforward. We've got to put the money in the ground, grow our existing resources, and find out what some of these other targets look like and try to bring them into the future.